I'm Benjamin. I'm 38 years old, and I discovered my parents wrote me out of their will, leaving a lifetime of assets to my younger brother. Before I tell you how a single, cold-blooded text message brought their entire world crashing down, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always incredible to see how far these stories can reach and connect us all. Alright, let's dive right in. The screen of my phone cast a pale blue light in my dimly lit office. It was a Tuesday afternoon, that soul-crushing part of the week where the weekend is a distant memory and Friday feels like a mirage. I was on a conference call, the voice of my boss a monotonous drone in my earbud, as I stared out at the city skyline. That's when it popped up. A message from my mom. It read, "The mortgage is due. Can you send what you usually do?" 16 simple words. 16 words that, a month ago, would have been completely normal. I would have sighed, maybe rolled my eyes good-naturedly, and replied, "On it, Mom." Then, like a well-trained machine, I would have opened my banking app, navigated the familiar menus, and sent the money. It was a rhythm we'd fallen into over a decade, a silent agreement where I played the role of the responsible son, the family's financial backstop. But today was different. Today, those 16 words landed like a lit match on a trail of gasoline. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly. My heart, which had been beating steadily moments before, was now a frantic drum against my ribs. In that split second, a montage of memories flashed through my mind. The sight of that legal document, my father's dismissive tone, my mother's pleading, manipulative eyes, the years of quiet sacrifice I had made, all dismissed as if they were nothing. The drone of my boss faded into white noise. The city outside might as well have been on another planet. My world had shrunk to the size of this glowing screen and the war I was about to declare. My fingers, now steady and cold, began to type. "Ask Lucas. It's his house now." I stared at the sentence. It looked alien powerful. I pressed send. The little blue bubble shot across the screen, an act of rebellion disguised as a text message. A profound, deafening silence followed, both in my message thread and in the deepest parts of my soul. For the first time in my 38 years, I had said no. I had chosen myself. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. How did a lifetime of loyalty curdle into this one bitter sentence? To understand that, we have to rewind. Just 1 month. To a sunny Saturday that started with an act of kindness and ended in the most profound betrayal of my life. 1 month earlier, the day began with a promise of mundane family duty. I'd driven the 40 minutes to my parents' house, the same house I grew up in, with my laptop and a brand new portable scanner. My mom, Eleanor, had called a few days prior, her voice a familiar blend of helplessness and expectation. "Benjamin, honey, your father and I are drowning in paperwork. We need to get everything digitized like you said. But these machines are just so confusing." So there I was on a beautiful Saturday afternoon, sacrificing my weekend to be their unpaid IT guy. The air in the house was thick with nostalgia. The scent of lemon polish, my dad's old leather chair, and the faint aroma of the roses my mom kept in a vase on the dining table. It was the smell of home, a scent I had always associated with safety and love. How ironic. "You're a lifesaver, Ben," my dad, Henry, greeted me, clapping me on the shoulder with a little too much force. "We'd be lost without you." "It's no problem, Dad," I said, forcing a smile. "Better to get this sorted out." He led me to the dining table, where 3 large cardboard boxes overflowed with a lifetime of documents. Bank statements from the 90s, old tax returns, car titles, my childhood report cards, a chaotic paper trail of their lives. My brother, Lucas, was, as expected, absent. "He's at a buddy's place," my dad explained vaguely, "working on some music stuff." The eternal excuse. I set up my equipment and got to work. For hours, it was a peaceful, almost meditative process. Scan, click, save. I organized everything into neat digital folders, bringing order to their chaos. I was in the final box, the one from the back of my dad's closet that smelled of mothballs when I found it. Tucked beneath a stack of old utility bills was a thick, professionally bound folder. It felt different from everything else. Heavy. Important. The label on the front, printed in a crisp, black, no-nonsense font, read, "Estate Plan, Final Copy." A small knot of curiosity tightened in my stomach. I knew they were getting older, and creating an estate plan was the responsible thing to do. I was proud of them for taking that step. I assumed, with the simple confidence of a son who had always done right by his parents, that it would be a straightforward 50-50 split between Lucas and me. It was the only thing that made sense. The only thing that was fair. I opened the cover. The legal language was dense, but the key sections were easy enough to find. I skimmed past the introductory clauses, looking for the distribution of assets. And then I saw it. Article 4. Disposition of residuary estate. My eyes scanned the paragraph. I give, devise, and bequeath all the rest, residue, and remainder of my estate to my son Lucas M. Rivers. I blinked. I read it again, and a third time. My brain refused to process the words. It had to be a mistake. A typo. I frantically flipped through the pages, my hands starting to feel clumsy. The house, the very house I was sitting in, the one I had poured tens of thousands of dollars into saving, was listed explicitly. To Lucas, the investment portfolio which I had helped my dad set up after his business failed. To Lucas, the life insurance policies whose premiums I had occasionally covered when they were short on cash. To Lucas, my heart was a cold, heavy stone in my chest. I kept searching, desperate for a clause, a paragraph, an addendum that mentioned my name. I finally found it on the second to last page, under a section titled General Provisions. We love both of our children, Benjamin H. Rivers and Lucas M. Rivers equally, and we trust them to care for one another after we are gone. That was it. That was my entire inheritance. A single, hollow sentence. I wasn't a son to be provided for. I was an unpaid caretaker, contractually obligated by a vague sense of trust. The air in the room felt thin, suffocating. The scent of lemons and roses now seemed nauseating. I closed the folder, the soft thud of the cover echoing the sound of a door slamming shut inside me. I stood up, my legs feeling weak, and walked into the living room. My dad was on his recliner watching a golf tournament. The gentle applause from the TV audience sounded like a mockery. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell. I simply held the folder out to him. His eyes flickered from the TV to the folder, then to my face. He didn't look surprised. He looked resigned. He knew this day would come. "Is this how it is, Dad?" My voice came out as a strangled whisper. "Everything? Everything goes to Lucas." He sighed, the sound of a man deeply inconvenienced. He muted the television. "We figured you'd understand, Ben," he said, his tone infuriatingly reasonable. "You're doing well for yourself. You're a project manager, you have a good salary. You've always done well." He said it like an accusation, like my competence was a crime, and this was the punishment. He wasn't looking at me, but at a spot on the wall just over my shoulder. He couldn't even meet my eyes, and in that moment I understood. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, a deliberate, calculated decision to write me off. "You've always done well." The words chased me out of the house. I stumbled onto the back porch and collapsed onto the wooden swing, the one I'd replaced 2 summers ago. The old one had rotted, and I'd spent a whole Saturday assembling the new one, sweating under the sun, while Lucas was at a jam session, another item on the long, invisible ledger of things I had done. The gentle creak of the chains was the only sound as I swung back and forth, my mind a raging storm. "You've always done well." The phrase echoed, each repetition peeling back another layer of my self-delusion. I had always worn my reliability like a badge of honor. Now I saw it for what it was, a harness. My mind started to catalog the sacrifices, not as acts of love, but as exhibits in a case against them. Exhibit A, the Boston promotion. 5 years ago, I was 33, a senior associate at my firm. An opportunity came up to lead a new team in Boston. It was a huge step up. A vice president title, a salary that would have changed my life, a chance to prove myself on a bigger stage. I remember the phone call with my director, the excitement in his voice. I also remember the phone call with my mom that night. "Oh, Boston," she'd said, her voice instantly laced with anxiety. "That's so far away, honey. What would your father and I do without you around to help with things?" It wasn't a question. It was a leash. I told my boss I needed to stay for family reasons. He was disappointed but understood. I told myself I was being a good son. The truth was I was being a fool. I had traded a promotion for their approval, and approval it turned out was never really there. Exhibit B, the foreclosures. The first time I was 28. Dad's small contracting business had just folded. I got a frantic call from him. The bank was starting foreclosure proceedings. They were 2 months behind on the mortgage. I went to my own bank the next day and took out a personal loan for $11,000, nearly wiping out my fledgling savings. I handed them the cashier's check. My mom cried and called me their guardian angel. They promised it was a loan, that they'd pay me back as soon as they were on their feet. A decade later, I hadn't seen a dime. The other 2 times were smaller, for unpaid property taxes, but each time required me to drain funds I had been setting aside for a down payment on my own place. My own future, liquidated to preserve their past. Exhibit C, the daily grind. It wasn't just the big, dramatic rescues. It was the slow, steady bleed. The car insurance I put on my credit card every 6 months. The weekly grocery orders. The time I paid a $2,000 dental bill for my dad because his insurance wouldn't cover it. The endless stream of, "Can you just spot me 100 until next week?" from Lucas, which I always covered, knowing next week would never come. Each act was a thread in the rope they had used to bind me to them. And for what? So they could look at my life, a life they had actively hindered, and use my hard-won stability as a justification to cut me out completely? The swing creaked. I wasn't their son. I was their emergency fund, their human ATM, their perpetually reliable, infinitely forgiving safety net. And they had just shown me, in the coldest way possible, that a safety net is something you only value when you're falling. The screen door opened, pulling me from my bitter reverie. It was my mother, Eleanor. She moved with a practiced slowness, as if approaching a spooked animal. She sat beside me on the swing, the added weight making it dip. For a full minute, we sat in silence, the only sound the rhythmic creak of the chains. "It's not that we don't love you, honey," she finally said, her voice a soft, gentle weapon. It was the voice she used to smooth over any conflict, the one that made you feel unreasonable for being upset. I didn't look at her. "Funny way of showing it," I muttered, my eyes fixed on a crack in the porch floorboards. "Please, Benjamin, try to understand," she pleaded, placing a hand on my arm. I instinctively tensed. "Lucas, he's just had a much rougher time of it. Things haven't come as easily to him as they have to you. You're steady. You're smart. You've always been our rock. So the rock gets nothing?" I shot back, finally turning to face her. "The rock just gets to hold everyone else up until it crumbles into dust? Don't be so dramatic," she chided, a flicker of irritation in her eyes. "It's not about what you get. It's about what he needs. We knew you would be okay. You always land on your feet. We had to make sure he would be taken care of after we're gone. He's more fragile." Fragile. He was 34 years old, living at home with no career and no prospects, and the word she used was fragile. Not irresponsible. Not lazy. Fragile. It was the ultimate excuse, the golden ticket that had allowed him to fail upwards his entire life. "And what about me?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "What about what I need? Did you ever stop to think that maybe I'm steady because I have to be? That I can't afford to be fragile because I've been too busy being your financial planner, your handyman, and your emergency contact?" She flinched, pulling her hand back. She was losing control of the narrative. She decided to change tactics, moving from placating to confessing, a classic move. "Look," she said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. There's something else. A while back, we had to co-sign on a business loan for him. For his recording studio idea. We really believed it was his big break. A cold pit formed in my stomach. I remembered the studio. A few $1,000s worth of second-hand equipment that now served as a glorified coat rack in the basement. How much was the loan, Mom? She waved a dismissive hand. Oh, it wasn't a huge amount, but it was significant for us. We have to make sure that's covered. The will helps with that. It secures his future, and ours. And there it was. The final, disgusting piece of the puzzle sliding into place. This wasn't about love or need. It was about debt. It was about risk management. I looked at her, and the years of motherly affection seemed to peel away, revealing a desperate, calculating woman underneath. You didn't choose him because he's fragile, I said, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. You chose him because you bet on him and lost. You gave him his inheritance years ago, and now you're making me pay for it. This will isn't a gift. It's an insurance policy on your bad investment. The look on her face was all the confirmation I needed. A flash of pure, unadulterated guilt. She opened her mouth to argue, to deny it, but no words came out. I stood up from the swing. The motion felt final. I have to go, I said, my voice flat and empty. I walked away without looking back, leaving her alone on the swinging porch, her carefully constructed world of justifications shattered around her. The drive home was silent, but my mind was screaming. The safety net was coming down. The 40-minute drive back to my apartment felt like a journey across a desert. When I walked through my own front door, the sense of betrayal was so thick I could taste it. My home, usually my sanctuary, felt like a temporary shelter before a coming war. I dropped my keys on the counter with a clatter that echoed in the silence. I didn't take off my jacket. I didn't get a drink. I walked straight to my home office and sat down in front of my computer, my movements stiff and robotic. I was operating on a cold, clear fury. All the hurt, the confusion, the sadness. It had been burned away, leaving behind a hard, diamond-like resolve. There was no room for doubt. They had made their choice, and now I would make mine. The first target was the most symbolic, the automatic bank transfer. For 7 years, on the first of every month, $1,200 had departed from my checking account and arrived in theirs. It was a digital umbilical cord, one I had never thought to sever. I logged into my online banking portal, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I found the recurring payment, a familiar line item I'd seen 100 times. I clicked Edit, and then Cancel Series. A small, innocent pop-up appeared on the screen. Are you sure you want to cancel this scheduled transfer? Are you sure? The question seemed to mock me. Was I sure I wanted to stop propping up the people who saw me as nothing more than a walking wallet? Was I sure I wanted to reclaim the thousands of dollars a year I was pouring into a house that had been promised to someone else? I let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded more like a bark. I clicked Confirm, with such force that my mouse slid across the desk. Done. The cord was cut. Next, I pulled out my phone. I went to my calendar, to the recurring reminders that cluttered my weeks. Order Dad's medication, every third Tuesday. I held my finger on the event. Delete this and all future events. Deleted. Call plumber about parents' leaky faucet, this Thursday. Deleted. Check in on Mom, every Sunday. My thumb hovered over that one for a heartbeat. A flicker of guilt. I crushed it. Deleted. Finally, the Instacart account. I had created it for them during the pandemic, and it had become a weekly habit. I would fill the virtual cart with their preferred brands of coffee, the low-sodium soups my dad needed, the ice cream my mom loved. I went into the app, navigated to my profile, and found the payment methods section. My credit card was listed as the primary. I swiped left. A red Delete button appeared. I pressed it without hesitation. With each click, with each deletion, I felt a strange lightness spreading through my chest. It wasn't joy. It was the feeling of a massive weight being lifted. A weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying. It was the burden of their expectations, their learned helplessness, their emotional and financial dependence. I had been their crutch for so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand on my own 2 feet without their problems leaning on me. I leaned back in my chair, the leather groaning in the quiet room. I knew this was just the beginning. The silence from their end would be temporary. My actions were a declaration of independence, and I knew with chilling certainty that they would see it as a declaration of war. The first week was silent, an eerie, unsettling calm before the storm. They probably hadn't even noticed the changes yet. They were living in the comfortable bubble of assumption, the belief that Benjamin would always be there. They had no idea their world was about to run out of air. The second week, the bubble began to wobble. The probes started, disguised as casual messages. The first was a text from my mom early on a Tuesday morning. Water bill came in higher this month. The online portal is so confusing. Can you check the account? I stared at the message. It was a test, a gentle tug on the leash to see if it was still there. She was trying to pull me back into the old dance, to pretend that the scene on the porch had never happened. The old me would have replied instantly, "Sure, Mom. I'll take a look." The new me read the message, felt a flicker of the old obligation, and then deliberately, decisively, deleted the entire message thread. No reply. Silence was my new language. A few days later, a text from my dad. "Hey Ben, the cable seems to be out. Did you pay the bill?" The implication was clear. If it wasn't working, it must be my fault. I had been handling their cable and internet bill for years, a bundled annoyance I'd taken on to simplify things. I ignored that message, too. Let him learn how to call customer service. The silence from my end was a foreign concept to them. It was a void where my compliance used to be, and it was clearly making them nervous. Then came the third week, and the text that ignited the firestorm, the one I had been waiting for. It was from my mother on the 5th of the month. "The mortgage is due. Can you send what you usually do?" There it was, the direct hit, the moment of truth. My heart hammered in my chest, a mix of anxiety and a strange, exhilarating sense of power. I typed out the reply I had been composing in my head for days. "Ask Lucas. It's his house now." I hit send. The immediate aftermath was an explosion. My phone, which had been quiet, suddenly began to vibrate nonstop. The first call was from Lucas. I ignored it. It went to voicemail. A second later, a text from him appeared. "Danny, what the hell? Mom is freaking out. She said you sent some crazy text. Don't be a drama queen. Just help them out like you always do. This isn't funny." The nickname, Danny. The casual dismissal of my feelings as drama. The assumption that I was just throwing a temporary tantrum. It all fueled the cold fire inside me. I typed back, my thumbs moving with precision. "This isn't a joke, Lucas. This is the new reality. You're the one who deserves it. You're the sole heir. So step up and be the man of the house. Handle it." His reply was instantaneous. A stream of angry emojis and misspelled curses. "You are being a real jerk, man. It's not about money, it's about family." I didn't dignify it with a response. An hour later, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line was urgent, mortgage payment. It was from my father. Inside, there was no message, just a payment request from their bank's portal for $3,200. The mortgage payment plus a hefty late fee. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it left me breathless. They weren't asking. They weren't pleading. They were sending an invoice for services no longer rendered. I clicked decline. A small window popped up asking for a reason. I typed one word, no. That's when the guilt trips began in earnest. A coordinated, desperate barrage. A text from Mom. "We could lose the house, Benjamin. Your childhood home. Is that what you want? To see us on the street?" From Dad. "I can't believe our own son would be so cruel. You'd really let your parents go homeless over a piece of paper." From Lucas. "You're tearing this family apart. All because you're jealous. I can't believe you." They were throwing everything at the wall, hoping something would stick. But the wall wasn't there anymore. I had replaced it with a window, and I was just watching them expose themselves for who they really were. I put my phone on silent. The screen continued to flash, a frantic beacon of their panic. The tremors were over. The earthquake had begun. When direct attacks and emotional blackmail failed to yield results, they escalated to a new, uglier theater of war: social media. It was a strategic, calculated move to isolate me and rally public opinion to their side. They knew I valued my reputation, and they intended to burn it to the ground. It started with my mother, the master of passive aggression. She posted a photo of a sunset on her Facebook page, accompanied by a caption dripping with manufactured sorrow. You give your children everything you have, your time, your love, your future. But sometimes, even all of that isn't enough to teach them gratitude. A mother's heart can be broken in ways you never imagined. The comments section immediately filled with sympathy from her circle of friends and distant relatives. "Oh, Eleanor, sending you hugs," wrote one. "You're the best mother anyone could ask for," wrote another. "Some kids today are just so selfish." They were building their narrative, brick by insidious brick. I was the ungrateful child. She was the martyr mother. My father, never one for subtlety, took a more direct approach a day later. He shared an article from some opinion website with the headline, "The Epidemic of Selfish Adult Children Abandoning Their Elderly Parents." His personal caption was short and brutal. "We thought we raised them right, but in the end, you can't control who turns their back on you when times get tough." A hard lesson to learn. The comments under his post were even more pointed. My Uncle Robert, his brother, chimed in with, "Some people forget where they came from, Henry. Keep your chin up." The implication was clear. I was the one who had forgotten. I watched all of this from the sidelines, my stomach churning. It was a public stoning, and I hadn't even been given a chance to speak. But the final, most vicious blow came from Lucas. He was the one who made it personal. He shared my father's post, but he added his own touch. He posted a photograph from our family Christmas get-together from the previous year. It was a group shot on the front porch, everyone smiling, wearing festive sweaters. Or almost everyone. He had taken the time to crudely crop me out of the picture. There was just an awkward empty space next to my mother where I had been standing. It was a literal erasure. His caption was a masterpiece of sanctimonious hypocrisy. "Some people only care about family when they're getting something out of it, like an inheritance," he wrote. "But real family shows up when things are hard. I would do anything to protect my mom and dad from the greed and selfishness in this world." That single post was a Molotov cocktail thrown into the family chat groups and community pages. My cousin, Sarah, who had always been jealous of my career, was the first to comment, "You are such a good son, Lucas. Your parents are so lucky to have you. Some people should be absolutely ashamed of themselves." The narrative was set. Lucas was the loyal, selfless son, protecting his vulnerable parents. I was the cold, greedy monster, obsessed with an inheritance, who had abandoned them in their darkest hour. They had expertly omitted the decade of my financial support. They had erased the 3 times I'd saved their house. They had conveniently forgotten about the secret loan that was the real root of all this. I sat there, scrolling through the comments, a feeling of profound nausea washing over me. These were people I had known my whole life. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family, friends. All of them liking and sharing this fabricated story. I was being tried and convicted by a jury of my peers, and my family members were the gleeful prosecutors. It was the loneliest moment of my life, but as the hurt subsided, it was replaced by something else. A cold, hard resolve. They thought a smear campaign would break me. They had no idea it was forging me into something unbreakable. The social media attack opened the floodgates. My family, emboldened by the public support they had cultivated, decided to deploy their flying monkeys. The first call came from my Aunt Carol, my mother's older sister. She was a professional pot stirrer, a woman who thrived on drama as long as it wasn't her own. "Benjamin, honey, it's your Aunt Carol," she began, her voice a syrupy concoction of fake concern. "I just wanted to call and check on you. I saw your mother's post, and my heart is just breaking for all of you." "Is it?" I asked, my voice flat. "Of course. Now, listen, I'm not taking sides, she said. The classic opening line of someone who has absolutely taken a side. You know I love you and Lucas equally. But your mother, Benjamin, she's a wreck. She's not sleeping, she's barely eating. And your father, with his heart condition. This stress is dangerous for him. This whole thing with the will has gotten so out of hand. Did my mother tell you why the will is written that way, Aunt Carol? I pressed, refusing to let her control the conversation. Well, she hesitated. She mentioned that you were in a much better financial position, and they needed to make sure Lucas was secure. That sounds sensible to me. You're a successful man, Benjamin. You don't need their money, but they need your support. Family is supposed to support each other. I supported them for 15 years, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I supported them to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars. I supported them by putting my own life on hold. This isn't about support, Aunt Carol. This is about being used. Tell me, did my mother mention the secret loan they co-signed for Lucas? There was a telling silence on the other end of the line. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty details, she stammered, caught off guard. All I know is that a family is worth more than any amount of money. I hope you'll remember that before it's too late. She hung up, her mission to manipulate me having failed. That night I met my friend Michael for a beer. He was my rock, the one person who knew the whole unvarnished truth. I showed him the Facebook posts, the cropped picture. He slammed his pint glass down on the table, making a few people at the bar turn their heads. Unbelievable, he seethed. The sheer, unmitigated gall of these people. They literally erase you from a photo while their golden boy, the source of all their problems, preaches about showing up. Ben, this is textbook narcissistic behavior. They're creating a narrative where they are the victims and you're the abuser, because they can't handle the reality of their own failures. I know, I said, staring into my beer. But it still gets to you. Seeing people I've known my whole life believe their lies. Forget them, Michael said, his eyes intense. They're not your family anymore. Your family are the people who have your back. And right now, that's me. So what's the next step? Are you just going to keep ignoring them? What else can I do? I asked, feeling a wave of exhaustion. Arguing with them is like wrestling with a pig in mud. You both get dirty, and the pig enjoys it. You hold your ground, he said firmly. You've made your decision. Now you stick to it. Don't let them drag you down to their level. His words bolstered my resolve. He was right. Engaging was a losing game. The only winning move was not to play. The next day, as if on cue, another call came. This time it was from David, an old family friend who had been close with my dad for 30 years. David was a blunt instrument, a man who saw the world in black and white. Ben, it's David, he began, forgoing any pleasantries. I just got off the phone with your father. I've never heard him sound so defeated. What in the hell are you doing to your parents? What I'm doing? I shot back, my patience gone. David, with all due respect, you have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, I think I do, he said, his voice rising. I'm talking about loyalty. I'm talking about duty. Your parents have had it tough. They took a massive risk for Lucas a few years ago, and it didn't pan out. That's life. But you don't punish them for trying to help their son. A massive risk? I repeated, a cold feeling creeping up my spine. What are you referring to? Exactly? You know what I'm talking about, he said, exasperated. That business loan they co-signed for him, putting up $35,000 for a kid's dream. That takes guts. And now, when the consequences of that risk come knocking, you turn your back on them? It's not a good look, Ben. The world tilted. My hand holding the phone went cold and clammy. I had to lean against the wall to keep my balance. $35,000? I whispered, the words barely audible. David, oblivious to the bomb he had just detonated, barreled on. Yeah, 35 grand. Henry was a nervous wreck for months over it. Worried Lucas wouldn't be able to make the payments. Turns out he was right. Why are you acting so surprised? Couldn't breathe. My mother had made it sound like a trivial amount. She had lied, A casual, devastating lie by omission. $35,000. It was a number that reframed everything. The will wasn't just unfair. It was a desperate, fraudulent scheme. They hadn't just chosen Lucas over me. They had used my future to pay for his past. They had given him a $35,000 advance on my inheritance, and then written a will that essentially forced me to pay for it twice over if I wanted to keep the family afloat. The fog of hurt and confusion in my mind evaporated, replaced by a terrifying, crystalline clarity. The smear campaign, the manipulative phone calls, it was all a frantic attempt to bully me back into my role as their financial savior, so I could fix the catastrophic mistake they had made. Ben, you still there? David's voice sounded distant. Yeah, David, I said, my own voice sounding strange and hollow to my ears. I'm here, and you just gave me the one thing I was missing. The truth. I hung up the phone. The eye of the storm had passed. I was no longer just defending myself. I was preparing for a counterattack. The next day, they brought the war to my doorstep. I was in a quarterly review meeting with my team and 2 senior directors. We were deep into a presentation on projected revenues when my desk phone, which almost never rings, began to chime. I ignored it. It rang again. Annoyed, I glanced at the caller ID. It was the front desk. "Excuse me for one moment," I said to the room, and picked up the receiver. "Benjamin, Jessica," the lobby receptionist whispered, her voice strained. "I am so sorry to interrupt your meeting, but your family is here, in the lobby. They're being quite insistent on seeing you." A block of ice formed in my stomach. Of course, they had exhausted every other avenue. This was their final, desperate gambit. A public ambush. They had come to my place of work, my sanctuary of competence and professionalism, to try and shame me into submission. The audacity was breathtaking. "Tell them I will be down in 5 minutes, Jessica," I said, my voice betraying none of the turmoil inside me. "And thank you." I turned back to the conference room. "Gentlemen, I apologize. A pressing family matter has come up that requires my immediate attention. We'll have to reschedule." They nodded, their faces a mixture of curiosity and concern. As I walked towards the elevators, my mind was racing. My first instinct was self-preservation. Find an empty conference room on a different floor. Get them out of the lobby. Contain the damage. Hide this ugly, messy part of my life from the people whose respect I had worked so hard to earn. But as the elevator doors slid open, another thought, cold and sharp, cut through the panic. No more hiding. No more shame. They had dragged this fight into the public square of social media. Now they had brought it to my professional home. They wanted an audience? Fine. I would give them one. I rode the elevator down, the quiet hum a stark contrast to the pounding in my chest. With each descending floor, my fear transmuted into a hard, cold anger. I wasn't the one who should be ashamed. They were. The elevator doors opened onto the expansive, sunlit lobby of my corporate office building. It was a space of cool marble, gleaming steel, and quiet professionalism. And standing in the middle of it all, like a car wreck on a pristine highway, were my family. My father, Henry, his face flushed with anger, his cheap sport coat looking rumpled and out of place. My mother, Eleanor, looking pale and tear-streaked, clutching her purse like a shield. And Lucas, lurking behind them, radiating a familiar aura of petulant defiance. Jessica shot me a wide-eyed, panicked look from behind the security desk. I gave her a curt nod, a silent message that I would handle it. I walked towards them, my footsteps echoing on the marble floor. I stopped 10 feet away from them, creating a clear no-man's land. "This is wildly inappropriate," I said, my voice low and steady, but loud enough to carry. "You need to leave. Now." "We're not leaving until we talk to you," my mother cried, her voice cracking, drawing the attention of several people passing through the lobby. "You won't answer our calls, Benjamin. What else were we supposed to do? You'd really let us lose the house?" My father boomed, taking a step forward. He was trying to intimidate me to play the role of the powerful patriarch. He seemed to have forgotten that his power over me was gone. I didn't flinch. I met his furious gaze. "The question isn't what I would let happen," I replied, my voice carrying through the now quieting lobby. "The question is, did you really think I would keep paying for a house you secretly gave to someone else?" A few people who had been heading for the exits paused. Their interest peaked. This was better than daytime TV. "We thought you'd understand," my mother pleaded, reverting to her favorite line. "You've always been the strong one, the responsible one, and you used that strength as an excuse to erase me," I said, the words like ice chips. "You used my responsibility as a blank check to fund his endless stream of failures." I flicked my eyes towards Lucas, who scowled. "This has nothing to do with me," he snapped, stepping forward. "This is about you being a selfish, greedy. It has everything to do with you." I cut him off, my voice sharp as a razor. The lobby had gone deathly quiet now. I could feel dozens of eyes on us. Out of the corner of my vision, I saw one of the main elevator banks open, and a group of executives stepped out, including my CEO, Mr. Thompson. They stopped, taking in the scene. My family, with their backs to them, didn't notice. "We raised you. We fed you. We gave you everything," my father roared, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. He jabbed a thick finger in my direction. "You owe us. You have a duty to this family." That was it. The final thread of my composure snapped. But I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I let a cold, mirthless smile touch my lips. "Oh, you," I repeated, my voice dangerously soft, forcing everyone to lean in to hear. "Let's talk about debts, Dad. I paid my dues to this family. I paid them every month for a decade when I covered your mortgage. I paid them every time I drained my savings to stop a foreclosure. I paid them when I gave up the biggest promotion of my career to stay here and be your personal safety net. I paid and paid and paid. And what was my reward? My thank you? You wiped my name from your legacy and pretended I never existed. We didn't mean to hurt you," my mother whimpered, the tears now flowing freely. It was a pathetic, last-ditch attempt at emotional manipulation. "You didn't mean to?" I shot back, my voice rising for the first time. "Then why did you lie to me? Why did you wait for me to disappear before realizing I was the only thing holding your entire world together?" And then, I delivered the coup de grace. I looked past them, making eye contact with the stunned face of my CEO, and then turned my gaze back to my father. "You want to talk about what I owe you? Let's talk about the $35,000 you owe me." The color vanished from my father's face. My mother let out a strangled gasp. Lucas looked utterly lost, his eyes darting between me and his parents. I don't know what you're talking about," my father stammered, his bravado crumbling into dust. "Oh, I think you do," I said, my voice resonating with cold, hard truth through the cavernous lobby. "Let's talk about the secret business loan you co-signed for Lucas. The one you never told me the real amount of. The catastrophic debt that made you write that will. It wasn't a choice between your sons, was it? It wasn't about who deserved it more. It was a desperate financial maneuver. You were just paying off a bad debt. And you decided that my inheritance, my security, my entire 15-year contribution to this family, was the price you were willing to pay. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a truth so undeniable it sucked all the air out of the room. Their mouths opened and closed like fish, but no sounds came out. The narrative they had so carefully crafted, of the poor, abandoned parents and the ungrateful, greedy son, had just been publicly and spectacularly incinerated. In that moment, in front of my colleagues and my CEO, they weren't sympathetic victims. They were exposed as liars, manipulators, and frauds. I saw the shock, the pity, and the dawning understanding on the faces of the people watching. Most importantly, I saw it in the panicked, guilty eyes of my family. They were shattered, and I was the one who had finally swung the hammer. This is the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my life. Thank you for staying with me this far. You are amazing. Please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below, just so I know you made it this far with me. It not only helps more people find this story, but it lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. There was nothing left to say. The three of them stood there, naked in their deceit, the grand architecture of the lobby bearing witness to their humiliation. My father, who had entered like a storm, now looked like a deflated balloon. My mother's sobs were silent, her shoulders shaking. Lucas stared at the floor, unable to look at anyone. The power dynamic had been irrevocably, seismically shifted. Without another word, they turned. A slow, shuffling retreat. They didn't look at me. They didn't look at each other. They walked through the large glass doors and out into the indifferent city sunlight, their departure as pathetic as their arrival had been aggressive. They left a vacuum of stunned silence in their wake. Slowly, the lobby began to breathe again. The low murmur of conversation returned. People started moving, pointedly not looking at me, trying to give me space. I stood rooted to the spot, the adrenaline beginning to recede, leaving a profound, bone-deep exhaustion in its place. I felt hollowed out, like I just survived a Category 5 hurricane. Benjamin. The voice was quiet but firm. I turned. It was my CEO, Mr. Thompson. He had walked over, his face unreadable. I braced myself for a reprimand, a lecture about professionalism, or worse, the awkward, "I'm sorry for your troubles" platitude. He put a hand on my shoulder. It wasn't a condescending pat. It was a steady, grounding gesture. "I'm not going to pretend I understood all of that," he said, his voice low. "But what I do understand is character. And what I just saw took an incredible amount of it. Go home, son. Take the rest of the day. Take tomorrow too if you need it. Your job will be here when you get back." I was speechless. In a moment of intense personal chaos, where my own family had tried to destroy my reputation, my boss had shown me more respect and understanding than they had in a decade. "Thank you, sir." I managed to choke out. That means a lot." He just nodded, gave my shoulder a firm squeeze, and walked away. The drive home was surreal. I felt strangely disconnected from my own body, like I was watching a movie of my life. The frantic calls and texts started on my way home, a desperate, last-gasp effort. I didn't block their numbers. I simply enabled the "Do Not Disturb" feature. Their panic could rage on its own, unheard. The messages continued for a day or two, a flurry of accusations, pleas, and angry demands. Then they dwindled and finally stopped. They knew it was over. A few weeks later, a morbid curiosity I couldn't explain led me to drive through my old neighborhood. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon. The streets were sleepy, familiar. I turned onto their block and slowed the car to a crawl. And then I saw it. Hammered into the middle of the lawn I had so often mowed was a stark, red and white sign. It had 2 words on it. "For sale." It was a strange sight, so final. The swing I had assembled on the porch was motionless. The rose bushes my mother had been so proud of looked untended. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a property, a distressed asset, a monument to a series of bad decisions. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. A missed call from Dad. A moment later, another from Mom. I watched the screen, my face impassive. I didn't feel the old, familiar pang of guilt. I didn't feel a surge of vengeful triumph. I just felt nothing. A quiet, profound emptiness where a family used to be. I had spent so much of my life thinking that house was my legacy, my responsibility. Seeing that sign, I realized the truth. It was never mine. It was a stage for their drama, and I was just a long-running cast member who had finally quit the show. I was never their backup plan. I was their primary plan, executed so flawlessly for so long that they forgot I had a say in the matter. They didn't just take my stability for granted. They believed it was their property, to do with as they pleased. The "for sale" sign wasn't my doing. It was the bill for their choices finally coming due. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb, not bothering to look in the rearview mirror. There was nothing back there left to see. The 6 months that followed were a quiet revolution. Without the constant drain of my family's drama and financial needs, My life began to expand in ways I hadn't thought possible. It was like I had been driving with the emergency brake on for 15 years and had only just released it. True to his word, Mr. Thompson called me into his office a week after the lobby incident. He didn't mention my family. Instead, he pointed to a map on his wall. "Boston," he said. "The VP position we discussed 5 years ago. The team is expanding again. The job is yours if you want it. This time, for real." There was no hesitation. No, let me think about it. No phone calls to my mother to gauge her reaction. "I'll take it," I said, a grin spreading across my face for what felt like the first time in ages. Moving was a catharsis. I sold my old apartment and most of my furniture, packing up only what was essential. It was a physical manifestation of the internal cleansing I was going through. Michael flew out to help me, and we spent a weekend painting the walls of my new place. A beautiful high-rise with a panoramic view of the Boston skyline. "To new beginnings," he said, raising a bottle of beer as we sat on the floor of my empty living room, surrounded by boxes. "And to leaving the vampires behind." I laughed, a real genuine laugh. "I couldn't have done it without you, man." "Yes, you could have," he said, his expression serious. "You just needed to finally believe you were worth fighting for. I'm just glad I was here to see it." Life in Boston was a revelation. I poured myself into my new role, and my work thrived. I made new friends. I started dating again. I explored the city, discovering its history and its hidden corners. I was living my life entirely for myself, and the feeling was intoxicating. I heard whispers about my old family through the sparse communications I maintained with a couple of cousins. The house was sold at a loss. My parents had moved into a small, run-down rental apartment in a town an hour away. The biggest shock was the news about Lucas. He had gotten a job. A real 40-hour-a-week job at a distribution warehouse. It seemed that with the Bank of Benjamin officially and permanently closed, he had been forced, for the first time in his 34 years, to stand on his own 2 feet. I felt a flicker of something. Not pride, not pity, just a detached acknowledgement that reality had finally caught up with him. One crisp autumn evening, as I was watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple from my apartment window, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something told me to answer it. "Benjamin." The voice was hesitant, familiar. Took me a moment to place it. "Aunt Susan?" I asked, surprised. She was my mother's youngest sister, always the quietest of the bunch, the one who stayed out of the family squabbles. "Yes, it's me," she said, sounding relieved. "I'm sorry to call out of the blue. I got your new number from Michael. I hope that's okay." "It's fine, Aunt Susan. It's good to hear your voice. Is everything all right?" Yes, I'm fine," she said quickly. I'm calling to apologize. I should have called months ago when all that ugliness was happening on Facebook. I stayed silent, and I'm ashamed of that. What Eleanor and Henry did to you was unforgivable. I want you to know that." Her words were like a soothing balm on a scar I didn't even know was still tender. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "That means more than you know. There's something else," she continued, her voice dropping lower. "Something you deserve to know. It might not change anything, but it might help you understand that this wasn't about you." "Not really." I sat down on my sofa, my full attention on the call. "What is it?" "Years ago, before you and Lucas were even born, our mother, your grandmother, passed away. She didn't have much, but she left a small inheritance in her will for her 3 daughters. Me, Carol, and Eleanor. It was about $10,000 each. A lot of money back then. Around that time, Henry's first business was failing. They were desperate. Eleanor came to me and our older sister, Margaret, and begged us to lend her our shares. She swore on our mother's grave she would pay it back within a year. Aunt Susan took a shaky breath. I was young and foolish, so I gave it to her. Margaret refused. A few years later, Margaret went through a nasty divorce and was left with nothing. She asked Eleanor for help. Not even for the money back, just for a small loan to get back on her feet. And do you know what Eleanor and Henry told her? They told her she was being irresponsible. They told her she should have planned better. They cut her off completely. They have a pattern, Benjamin. A sick, twisted pattern of using one person's resources to fund their ambitions, and then abandoning that person when they're no longer useful. It wasn't about love or need or who was stronger. It's a sickness in them. You weren't the first person they sacrificed. But I am so damn proud of you for being the last. The phone call ended, but I sat there in the dark for a long time, the city lights beginning to twinkle below. The story didn't erase the pain of my own betrayal, but it did something more profound. It lifted the burden of personal responsibility. It wasn't my fault. I hadn't failed them. I hadn't been unlovable. I was just the latest player in a game that had been rigged long before I was born. And by walking off the field, I had finally won. So now, I sit here, in my apartment, in my new life, looking out at a city that feels like mine. The air is clean. My phone is quiet. My future is a blank page that I get to write myself, with no one else holding the pen. I don't hate them. I think to feel hatred, you need to feel something. And when I think of them now, I feel a profound and unshakable nothingness. They are characters in a story about a man I used to be. Their power over me was built on a foundation of love, guilt, and obligation. Once I realized the love was conditional, the guilt was manufactured, and the obligation was a one-way street, the entire structure collapsed. For most of my life, I believed that family was an unbreakable bond, a non-negotiable part of your existence. I've learned that's a dangerous lie. True family isn't determined by blood. It's forged in respect. It's built on the solid ground of reciprocity. It's proven in the quiet moments of unwavering support. My family is Michael, who flew across the country to help me paint a room. It's Mr. Thompson, who saw my character in a moment of crisis and rewarded it. It's my Aunt Susan, who found the courage to speak a difficult truth and offer a long overdue apology. That is family. The rest is just genetics. I lost a mother, a father, and a brother. That's a hard sentence to say. But in exchange, I found my own worth. I found my boundaries. I found my freedom. I learned that no is not a curse word, but a sacred one. It's the word that separates who you are from who other people want you to be. It's the foundation of self-respect. They never saw me as their safety net. They just saw me as part of the ground, something that would always be there to catch them. They forgot that the ground can choose to move. I moved, and I am never, ever going back. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to tell, but it felt necessary. I hope it resonated with you in some way, and maybe even gave you a little bit of strength if you're facing your own battles. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to make a difficult choice to protect your own peace and well-being? I'd be honored if you'd share your story or your thoughts in the comments below. And please, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what I share next. Your support truly means the world to me.
Very few, I'm going to say single-digit people that are successful in being able to do that. But think about that. We got a compound here that has the ability to heal people of opioid addiction in 48 to 72 hours. And we're not doing everything that we can in our power to make that available? I mean, what the hell's wrong with us? How bad you got to hate people to not make that available?
And with 2 doses, it's even more spectacular.
98%.
That is amazing.
98%.
That is truly amazing. There's nothing even remotely like it with standard practice addiction therapy. Nothing.
You know, he mentioned the Americans for Ibogaine. We have ambassadors. And Joe, what you really helped us do on January 2nd of 25 was create a movement. Our organization is the custodian of that movement. We are a public policy and advocacy organization, and Governor Perry mentions keeping me on the road. Wherever there are state leaders, citizens of conviction and influence, whether that is California, whether it's Massachusetts, or whether it's Alabama, we exist to plant the seed of a scientific understanding, of a public policy framework, and of a spiritual understanding of the significance of what we have in our hands here. An opportunity to improve the human condition at scale. And while we have talked tightly about ibogaine impact on substance dependency and upon the wounds of war, our ambassadors reflect essentially the universal human condition and the way in which individuals who have tried every way to overcome various forms of trauma and debility find as the last step a redemptive restoration through ibogaine treatment. It is not for everybody. It should not be a first resort. It is an exceptionally powerful medication that comes with a series of side effects that are highly unpleasant, as you previously mentioned. One of the selling points, ironically, in the Texas legislature was to say, if your idea of a good time is being in a state of semi-paralysis for 12 to 16 hours and throwing up continuously through the process, you're going to have a real good time. And if there is the equivalent of being brought to the judgment throne of God on this side of life, it is an ibogaine experience. That seemed to motivate a lot of support, especially for those who subscribe to puritanical notions of punishment for wrongdoing. That's not what I'm here to advocate, but certainly it is not fun. But what we know is that, for instance, we have two fashion model twins whose fathers sexually abused them for a decade. And the results of that horrific experience that they shared produced all kinds of psychological maladies that included an eating disorder for one, persistent neuroses in the other. They tried every form of talk therapy. They tried every psychotherapy modality known to try to overcome that. And it was ibogaine that restored their lives and their capacity to enjoy the life that God has given them. We have first responders who are emerging in numbers. One who is a firefighter from Oklahoma who was demoted because of decades of alcoholism. His life has been restored by ibogaine and he's back working full time. We have a gentleman who was a Charlottesville police officer who was hit in the face with a brick during the riots that occurred in Charlottesville. His life was restored by